questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live. There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate Podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cultivate Podcast with the Grove Church. I'm Charlie Loften, lead pastor there, and we have Abigail Boone, creative director for the Grove Church, producer of the podcast, bringer of questions and joy.
Thank you.
Yep. So glad that you are with us as always. And we are working our way through some points of systematic theology and are currently in a sub-series in that, talking about anthropology, the study of humans. And we have talked about the creation, but in kind of in a more non-traditional way, just kind of what do we learn about who we are from the creation story, as opposed to allowing ourselves to get bogged down in a creation evolution debate. But even in the middle of that, I managed to take quite a few pot shots at the theory of evolution as an insufficient story to explain the who's, what's, and whys of who we are.
Right.
Then we spent some time talking about that very powerful passage in Genesis chapter 1 that says that we're created in the image and likeness of God and what that means. And we tied it back to that. We learn about who God is and who we are from this creation story and kind of put those things together and understanding what does it mean to be created in the image of God, and that we should feel both special and accountable. And it's a beautiful story. And it would be great if the story kind of not ended there, but just kind of like that, kind of stayed in that same sort of space where we are a special, unique creation, loved by God, given a job and purpose and life by God, created to be in a special place and a perfect, wonderful relationship with God. But it didn't stay that way. And I guess we have not, as of yet, said anything about Genesis chapter 2. Genesis 1 and 2, so Genesis 2 kind of goes into more detail about what the story of the creation of people was like. It starts with Adam being created from dust, and the Lord formed a man and from the dust of his ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed, and there was all these trees, and there was these beautiful rivers, and there's all these awesome things, and it was just this beautiful place. And God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. And he commanded, hey, you can eat from any tree in the garden, but do not eat from this one particular tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. And so we see kind of, again, this thing that we were talking about before, the tender care that God has, and that it wasn't like, again, a very intentional image here that God is making of, I have created everything. Now I'm going to, separate from all of that, create a being and then place it into this very special place with a very particular job, and really with just one rule. Don't eat this from this one particular tree. Right. You can eat anywhere else you want, just don't eat from this one particular tree. And then it goes into the thing that you're going to hear in every Christian marriage from now until eternity. It's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. And so then,
I dare you to not read it at my wedding.
You dare me to not read it at your wedding? No, I definitely won't. I'm not out here doing standard weddings. Perfect. But I will do whatever you would like for me to do.
Okay.
Even if your fiance/husband objects, it's about what the bride wants.
You're
so you tell me what you
movies the whole time.
Do what?
Just do a whole monologue of quoting movies.
What if the entire little small sermon was just a collection of various movie quotes?
Yes.
That would take a lot of work.
Well, you can do it. Start now. I'm not dating anyone. Might as well start now.
Well, I think AI could help with that.
Yeah.
Create me a 5-minute
script
marriage homily that is just only great. I want to do that right now.
Okay.
No, we got.
But then save it for my wedding.
and then just hold on to it. And so God goes through this little thing where he takes all the different pairs of animals and brings, hey, I want you to give them a name. And so Adam is naming all these things. And then it says that no suitable helper was found for him. And sometimes we read that in terms of like God was trying to match him up with a lion or something, which is ridiculous. That's not what he was trying to do. He was exposing to Adam the need that he had. You're alone, and God recognized, hey, it's not good that you're alone, and I'm going to show you this. Look how every animal has a companion, and it says, and a suitable helper was not found for you. You don't have one of these. Allow me to make one. So God sees a need. It shows Adam the need and then meets the need, which is, again, it's a very beautiful pattern. I see that you have some lack. I want you to be able to see it too, so that you will then appreciate the gift that I'm giving you, which is just a great pattern, which I think that God uses to show his love for us. So then he creates Eve, again, a very interesting image here, by taking a rib from Adam and creating Eve from that. And Adam is very fired up. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. I mean, I think that passage is probably a little steamier than we give it credit for. I mean, it is a very passionate sort of connector. And again, if this were on a different topic, there's a lot to say about that, but that is not today's topic. Today's topic goes to chapter 3 again. So Adam was given this one rule: don't eat from this one tree. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. He said to the woman, which is interesting. This is an interesting start to the story. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the tree that it is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. What do we notice so far?
He's talking to the woman.
He's talking to the woman instead of the man.
A snake is talking.
A snake is talking at all. That's good. And what does Eve say when she repeats back the command to the snake?
She thinks
that it's not that women think. That's not what we're getting at.
That's
here.
Not what Abigail. I meant. She's trying to recall something that was said to her husband.
Right.
Or to the guy.
And what she said was, you must not eat the fruit from the tree, and you must not touch it.
Right. She added to it.
She's already adding to it, which is just unusual.
Right.
Okay. And then the serpent says, you will certainly not die, for God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. What do we notice here?
Their shame has appeared.
Shame is the most immediate impact seems to be shame.
That's a wild beast.
And shame about something that isn't
that God didn't say was wrong.
That isn't shameful.
Right. He created it that way.
I mean, it wasn't like, and their eyes were opened, and as Adam is stabbing some other dude, he felt shame.
Right.
They
became aware. Yeah, they became insecure of what God had already created them to be.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, because I feel ashamed because I've been lying to my family for the last 10 years. Oh, you're not supposed to feel shame. Shame is a result of the fall. I'm like, well, we need to have a little nuance to our words. I mean, the shame that is talked about here is something that God has declared good. Now you feel shame about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal. What else do you notice from that section?
They used a part of God's creation to cover themselves up.
Yeah.
And it's not what fig leaves were designed to do.
They take something that was not, and they try to solve their own problem. What about the serpent's response? You will certainly not die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Straight up question is, what of that is a lie?
That God doesn't want us to know things because we're created in his image already.
You will not certainly die. He says that.
You will die. Isn't that what God said?
Right.
If you eat of this tree?
But, you know.
He's bending the truth.
They didn't die.
Right. Immediately.
Right? I mean, yeah. So, I mean, so that he was, I mean, depending on what he meant when he said it, it wasn't technically a lie.
Right. But
God
really
knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened.
Mm-hmm.
Also true.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
You already are.
Also true. But it's also true. There is some things that they did not know.
Mm-hmm.
They did not know what evil was.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also true what he says. When you eat this, you'll know what good and evil is. Right now, they only know good. They don't know what evil is.
Right.
And so everything that he says there, you kind of have to squint your eyes a little bit. He technically doesn't lie.
Right.
Which is why he is often referred to as a deceiver.
Right.
In this context. It's not that he's not also a liar.
Right.
But in this context, he's
like he just confused them.
Yeah, a manipulator, a deceiver. Mm-hmm. And so when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, which again, she misunderstood what he meant by knowing good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
She took some and ate it. And to me, this is the part that I feel like doesn't make it into our telling of the story enough. She also gave some to her husband who was with her.
He didn't show up after the fact.
He was there the whole time.
Yeah.
He was there the whole time.
Seemingly.
Watching this thing go down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened.
Mm-hmm.
So she ate and nothing happened.
And then they both ate.
And then he ate, and then something happened, which is also it's just interesting the way that is told. And then they immediately together feel the shame, and then they cover themselves. And so, you know, the snake's role in this, which is very explicitly said in Revelation, that the snake is Satan manifesting himself as this snake. It's not just a snake.
Mm-hmm.
Satan's role in this, and that he is deceiving more than outright lying. You know, I mean, he is getting her to question the character of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're misunderstanding who God is. God's not telling you the whole truth here. You know, just kind of a manipulation. And then the fact that he's having this conversation with her when they're both there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that Adam is there. That's unusual. We don't highlight that. And the fact that nothing happened until they both ate.
Right. Well, and it wasn't just him being Satan. It wasn't just let's carry out this really crazy act over here. It was just questioning what they know about God.
Yeah.
And trying to get them confused on that concept to then do something.
Yeah, so God places a tree and says, you can have everything you want except this one tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be like, God, why'd you have to do that?
It kind of sets it up kind of like an I Love Lucy episode where you're like, well, I know what's going to happen.
Right. Like you didn't have to, like he didn't have to put that in there.
Right.
You'd have to put that in the garden, which again shows to the thing that I said last week that you kind of were like giving me the side eye about, right? This is a test and they failed.
Mm-hmm.
It was meant to be a test.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is, it's funny that you say this feels like the kind of episode of a sitcom, because it really is symbolic of not only so many wacky scenarios that you could put in movies and TV shows, but the way that we live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You are in a garden. We have no idea how big it is, but I get the idea when they kind of talk about it, this river, it borders here and it borders here.
It's huge.
We're talking about miles.
Right.
We're talking like maybe like of a small state.
Yeah.
In the United States, right? Let's just say it's the size of New Hampshire.
I cannot even picture that in my mind.
Let's just say it's the size of, let's make it even probably smaller than what it is, the size of all of Northwest Arkansas.
Okay, that's better.
Okay, and we'll go all the way down to Fort Smith, all the way down to Fort Smith and over maybe up to Ozark and up and to Harrison. That's that little whole northwest quadrant of the state.
It's huge.
And there's one tree
out of all of that
in all of this area that you can't eat. Bro.
Right. Why you gotta do that to us?
Hang out. No, I'm just saying, hang out anywhere.
Yeah. I would have to hang out on the other side of the
Why
garden.
not?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you could get only 1 mile away from it and have all the food that you need.
Right.
But they were right at that. Like, there was something about it. Again, it points to a test, and it also just shows that there is just something in us that is drawn to forbidden.
But I feel like people don't like, you are willing to say it's like a test, but a lot of people don't like that.
Why would they not like it?
Because that feels deceiving by our Creator.
What's deceiving?
Well, maybe not deceiving. It feels like a trick.
What trick?
That there's something tempting us right there.
Well, then the problem is for him to put it in the tree at all, in the garden at all.
Right.
I mean, yeah. There is no other reason for it to put something in the garden that if you did it, something bad is going to happen. The only reason to do that is to teach you something.
Right.
And
that is not a bad thing.
And that is what
that way.
And that is what a test is.
Yeah.
To see if you have learned something.
Yeah.
Do you trust me?
Yeah.
And the answer was no.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And again, this gets into, again, I feel like I've put my toes in controversial waters unintentionally a handful of times over this. The fact that when Eve ate, nothing happened. The curse, the fall only happened after Adam ate. Whatever it is we believe about egalitarianism and complementarianism, that says something.
Right.
It says something. In part, I think, because it was Adam that was first created and the only one of the two of them who had been given the command directly.
Right.
So she was kind of under him in that, at least in that regard. You can say that doesn't have anything to do with anything that's happened since then.
Sure, but that was the dynamic of the garden.
It definitely, I mean, it's hard to say that whatever it is we're trying to think about this issue, that Genesis 3 has nothing. Genesis 2 and 3 has nothing. It's got something to say that you have to decide what you believe about it. And so I just don't want to be a coward.
Sure.
And not at least point that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid something controversial.
Okay.
All right. And so then what happens next? They cover themselves. The man and the wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to the man, "Where are you?"
Which feels funny.
There's a few things that are funny about that to me. One is
he's only looking for Adam, but also there's no way he doesn't know where he is.
No way he doesn't know where he is. So they are hiding from him, which is ridiculous. I'm going to hide from the creator God of the universe. That's crazy that you think that you can hide from him. And God playing along with it. And honestly, I think giving him an opportunity, right? Like, I mean, he could have just materialized
it's
right
almost
in
like
front of him.
He like condescended, not negatively condescended, but he like condescended down to them.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know I talk about my niece all the time, but literally today she was FaceTiming me and she'd cover up her eyes and be like, "Oh my gosh, where did Maeve go?" And she believes it. Right. And she's like, "I'm right here." You can condescend to that level.
I'm going to play this game on your terms and just kind of see how it goes.
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of a show of love.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm going to, what? Okay. What do you think has happened here? Where are you? I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And he said, "Who told you that you were naked?"
But
Which again, it's a little bit like you go into, at some point you'll go into Maeve's room and there's going to be an empty candy wrapper and she's going to have chocolate on her face. And you're going to be like, "Where did this empty wrapper come from, Maeve?"
I love those moments.
And she's going to be like, "I know.
I have no idea.
I know. What's that on your face?"
Nothing. Drool.
I know, right? I mean, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man said, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. So Adam, what is Adam's instinct?
Accusatory.
To whom?
Defensive.
Who is he accusing?
The woman.
And?
That you gave me.
That you gave me.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing fine by myself, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That woman that you gave me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's very inexperienced, but is already really, really good
doing the
at
dialogue.
deflection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? I mean, at least for now, looks past the insult and the deflection. Is
sure.
Like,
I would have done the same thing probably.
Okay, I'll keep playing. I'll keep playing.
Yeah.
The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate.
But he's only talking to Adam right now, right?
No. Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done?
Okay.
And the woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. So interesting here, right? She puts the blame on the snake, and then God turns his attention to the snake. And it's really interesting the way that he does this, because it seems like at one part of this, he is cursing the actual animal, the actual animals, snakes, which really seems
fitting because I
unfair
don't like
to the snake. Like, what did the snake do? Like snakes in general, what did snakes do? Nothing.
Like the body that encased Satan at the time.
I mean, when Satan did that. It's all Satan's fault. Like, it's not the snake's fault.
I know, but I just hate.
But
snakes.
again, it's symbolic.
Sure,
it's symbolic. But then he switches really to a switch to really speaking to Satan himself and says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offsprings and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." On the one hand, you could be like, that could all still just be talking about people and snakes, because people don't like snakes, and snakes are biting heels, and we do step on their heads. But there is something deeper that he's saying there. There is an enmity that is going to happen between people and what you're about, Satan, and you are going to be constantly coming at heels, but your head is going to be crushed, which this is referred to as the first prophecy about Jesus.
Right.
That this is talking about you're going to come at people. Really, you're going to come at a particular person. And you're going to bite his heel, which he does. He kind of comes at him. But he's ultimately going to get his head crushed. And so there's a lot going on there in this consequence. This kind of setting up the story of Satan's role in the earth, which we talked about before in angelology, the role that he has, and then ultimately setting up the big picture solution that is going to come to this. You have caused this problem. It is going to be a problem for a long time, and you are going to be a heel biter, but ultimately your head is going to get crushed. And this is going to be fully manifested in the time of Jesus.
Right.
To the woman, he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, from dust you are, and to dust you will return. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of living things, the mother of all the living. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken.
It was interesting since we did the first, I guess it was chapter 2, or chapter 1 or chapter 2, talking about all the things that God is providing, the food, the vegetation, the animal, whatever it was, and all of the curses still correlate back to those things. There's not like extra things that come out of nowhere that wasn't created beforehand. It's just like, I told you you're going to be fruitful and multiply, but now that's going to be really hard.
Now it's going to be difficult in both ways.
I told you that y'all are going to be a really good help. Now it's going to be really hard. Yep. I told you that you have food galore to pick from and have at whatever you need. Now it's going to be really hard. Yeah.
So now I wanted you to be fruitful and multiply. Now childbirth is going to be awful. I've told you that you're going to be, again, have this partnership and help one another. And now it's going to be,
you're going to be at each other's throats.
There's going to be beef. There's going to be fighting rather than kind of this partnership. And you're still going to have to take care of the earth in order to produce food, but
it's not going to be easy.
It switches from work to toil, which is an interesting thing. Work is not sinful.
Right.
Toil, that's different.
Work is not a curse.
Right. Work is not a curse. The fact that work becomes toil is. And now we've been at it so long.
Right.
They feel like the same thing. Work is toil, but that is a consequence. Childbirth is hard. That seems normal, but it's a consequence.
Right.
Husband and wife battling over who gets to be in charge feels normal.
That's a curse.
But it's a curse. And so then he's like, and you've got to go. But on his way out, and again, it's just another beautiful picture of what is about to come in all of the rest of the Bible. They try to cover themselves with leaves, which are completely inadequate.
I'm sure he was like
what on earth were they even using to bind the leaves together? Anyways.
I've never even thought about that. It just stuck to them. It adheres.
I guess they were so nervous. Right. They were so nervous. They were sweaty.
A little damp.
Stuck it to gross. But rather than accepting their inadequate answer, he does something. And what does he do?
Better to provide for them.
But in order to do it, an animal had to be sacrificed. So he kills an animal to provide them with covering, which moves us into the sacrificial system that's about to get created in a couple of books, and then
I feel like people
moves us all the way into Jesus.
Right. Well, there's so many parts of this story that are probably, we've heard it so much that we lose the weight of what's happening there. But like, just imagining you've done something totally unforgivable in your family, quote unquote. But then for your parents to give you everything you need as they kick you out of your house is a totally different thing. And so like, that's what he did. He gave them the ability to still survive, but
right
now go.
Well, but then you add to that, but first you got to watch me kill this goat. Right.
See what you
who had not done anything.
Yeah.
What did the goat do? Nothing. But you're going to watch me kill it and skin it, and then I'm going to give you that. And you're like, thank you. This is also a little bit yikes.
Well, because they hadn't been in a world where animals got slaughtered like that yet.
Yep.
So it was gruesome.
And so on the hindsight for us, it's like, oh, that's great. I mean, people have been making clothes out of animal skin for a really long time, and there was so the people who read it for the first time, the Israelites coming out of the Exodus, that would not have been shocking to them. But how shocking would it have been to Adam and Eve to have watched that? So you want to put your brain in the eyes and ears of the original reader, but also the people that it's happening to. I mean, that would have been overwhelming. Now there's blood everywhere, and
also
now I'm wearing an animal skin.
Right. Well, also, this is kind of the first time we entered into the theme of wandering too. That we're set out. Obviously, Israel is the homeland, all the like promised land, all of that kind of stuff. But even before then, Adam and Eve being sent out is the first step into wandering and not having a home place that was specifically created for us to thrive and reproduce.
So we are going to move from here to hamartiology, which is the study of sin. You have heard of it.
You're right. I've
maybe
heard of that.
15 to 20 episodes
ago. I use that
ago.
word all the time.
We're going to talk about sin and sin, its consequences, different sorts of sin. We'll talk about original sin. We'll talk about personal sin, and then that'll give us our transition then into Jesus and salvation, all these things. And so we're here already. This is kind of the bridge point between anthropology and hamartiology, because we're talking about the fall of man and simultaneously the origin of sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of these things we will come back to as we are really understanding sin and its consequences. But I think it's important in our study of anthropology to understand really what were the consequences of this. On the one hand, the consequences were birthing babies is hard, work is hard,
mm-hmm.
and husbands and wives be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's...
Could you expand that even to just male and female are fighting, or do you think it's a curse to husband and wife?
I think it's specifically a curse on the brokenness of what was meant to be a most intimate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, by extension, if you and I are fighting, that's a result of the fall, but it would also be true if Mark and I were fighting.
Right.
Enmity in general
mm-hmm.
is a result of the fall, but I think specifically in that it is talking about
husband and wife,
marriage conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
But deeper than that, you go beyond the shallow. The deeper parts of it are separation from God,
mm-hmm.
that you see both in them hiding from Him. God's presence is no longer a joy to them.
Right.
It is something to hide from.
Well, also, can you imagine hearing the footsteps of God? Scenario.
But for them, it would have been very normal and great up until that particular point.
Right.
And now suddenly this is something to be afraid of.
Right.
Which people talk about all the time. If I could see God, it would be great. And I was like, only if you're doing good.
Right. Right.
And if you're not, you're not. And none of us are. And so that's why every encounter that anyone ever has remotely coming to seeing God is terrifying to everyone.
If not killing
And this
them.
is new to them. And so it is a new concept, this idea of being separated from God.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual, which then results in what we call spiritual death. If you are separated from God,
mm-hmm.
at this point, there is no reason to think that you'll ever be reconciled back to Him.
Right.
We get the hints of that through the making of the animal clothes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The skin coverings, those sorts of things. And again, we're talking about Jesus, and ultimately the word is going to get out as God is talking and explaining salvation and things to him and how you do come back. But at this point, spiritual death, an eternal separation from God is on the table. And now we got to figure out, how do we get back to Him?
Mm-hmm.
Physical death, though not immediate, is now a result of this. The broken relationships, suffering, toil, all these things. These are the consequences of sin.
Well, I feel like also this may be really general, but just the needs being met. We were completely satisfied in every way that you could imagine before then. They weren't curious as to where their next meal came from. They weren't curious if they were going to be rested, curious if they're going to be full, whatever. Now it is where's that going to come from?
Right.
Probably weird to say material, but material needs were all met. And then now you're in a situation of at a lack.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this more as we kind of make the transition to sin, but the theological questions to ask here are, is this instance and kind of the consequences that have come from this, is this enough to explain how broken the world is right now?
Mm-hmm.
This event and the consequences that come from it, plus time, sufficient to explain, because this is a big picture question to ask, which again is important to ask, even if you have a secular, atheistic, evolutionary view.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the world broken? Why is it so? Is this sufficient to answer that question? And because no, man, there's some problems in this world that seem to go deeper than that, or is it like is what has happened here justifiable to allow? If so, then it seems like that there is a lot of evil now in the world, a lot of darkness. Did God overreact?
Right.
Does this sufficiently explain the amount of evil in the world? And if yes, does this make me wonder about what God's like? It didn't have to be all this.
Right.
I mean, I get it. They can't be in the garden anymore, and childbirth is hard and work is hard, but
well, that just seems like
but the number of genocides that have happened since then, and disease and famine and brokenness everywhere. I mean,
well, I feel like that just brings into question of what is your view of him? Right. Because me offending, there's things that I'm sure I could do, and I'd be like, oh, that's just no biggie. They'll get over it. But then there's something I could do to like my father or something like that, or my mom, and I'd be like, oh, that's a big deal. Even if nobody has told me X, Y, and Z matters X much more because it's this person, but it's like, what do we view about God, and what do we believe to be true? Do we think it's actually a great offense to go against the order that he has created?
Right. Yeah. I mean, do we have an appropriate scale for how bad is a sin against God? And again, we'll talk more about this, but the way that we were describing how amazing the Genesis 1 God is, what is an appropriate consequence for rebelling and offending that God? I mean, he's nice, but that's not all we learn about him from Genesis 1. What is the offense?
His power.
What is the appropriate consequence for offending a God that good and that powerful? What is an appropriate response? And we can say all we want, it should be less, but it's kind of a self-interested answer,
right?
So we'll definitely spend some time getting into that, because I think the ball is now rolling. Sin has now entered into the world. What are its ongoing consequences? So Adam and Eve failed their test. Are we all subject to that same test? Or did he fail it on behalf of all of us?
Right. That's a big question.
Right? So are we born innocent into a bad world? They were born innocent into a good world. Are we born innocent into a bad world? Or are we born under the burden? We are like them now. We are no longer innocent, but we are fallen sinners in a fallen world. Or are we innocent people in a fallen world, and because we're innocent people in a fallen world, we're all going to fall? Or is there something about our very nature that has been corrupted by this? Right. There was a time when that was less controversial.
Now it's a pretty hot topic.
It's pretty controversial now.
But you can read, what is it, Romans 8?
We can read Romans 8. You can read Romans 5. You can read Romans 8. You can read Romans 9, or you can choose not to. Anyways, Abigail, thanks as always. And thank you for joining us. And Abigail and I will have a powwow if we're going to just jump straight into martyrology, or we're going to do some Q&A first. You'll find out next week, and we will continue on in our discussion of systematic theology. As always, thank you so much for joining us. And you can find more about us as a church. You can ask questions about our podcast or questions for the podcast, thegrovechurch.org/connect. You can find a form there you can fill out. Anyway, we would love to know you, help you any way that we can, and see you soon. Thank you for listening to the Cultivate Podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.